So I'll do my little, got it. Yep. Introductions here. Typically, I have like a whole little spiel all figured out. Not so today, but I do want to say, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. We're really happy that you're joining us here today. I'm Cheryl Neeser, and I'm really happy to be welcoming all of our returning attendees and those that are new to the Minnesota Agile Community event. So our MAC team is really for those that have never joined us before. You've not heard my spiel, but I'm not going to go over what our mission and vision is, because it really is to provide a forum for people to learn, to communicate, to partner, to really talk about those things and ask for those things from which they can, contribute to their own learning, but also contribute to the learning of the community. So really appreciate every one of our speakers, everyone that's contributed more than once, and those that have promised to do so in the future. So it really helps us from advancing our skills from whatever level, from whatever place you are. We're really about meeting people where they are and helping them progress and learn and grow. So our team, just briefly, we have really a diverse team from a variety of different companies around the Twin Cities, as well as outside of the Twin Cities, because Angie Agresto is in Duluth, or she's over in the beautiful northern part of Minnesota, like Cheryl Anderson. But so Julie Ruse with RBC, U.S. Wealth Management here in the Twin Cities. Chris Wickett is with Improving. Cheryl Anderson, as I mentioned, is up in the north part of Minnesota, near Canada, and she is with C Prime. Craig Schumann is also on our little project team board, and he is with Turnberry, or we were talking the other night, and he's like, I think we're on our third renaming and there's talk of another, so we'll see what the next one is. Angie, as I mentioned, is with Agresto Consulting and Training. Marilyn Lang is with Blue Cross Blue Shield out of North Dakota. A member at large that we have is Mark Strange. She's with Lucid. And we also have a Women in Agile Twin Cities partner in Sharon Auerbach. I don't believe Sharon is signed up for today, but next, let's see, it's October. We will be sharing our time with the Women in Agile group. And so look for that event to come out soon. And we're always recruiting people who want to help us craft up the next meetup agenda. And so reach out if you have any time or interest in doing that. Absolutely share your feedback and any topic requests that you may have. Before I get too far into introducing our presenters for this evening, I want to say that next month in September, we have Chris Wickett. She is going to, we're just dreaming up a new title for her talk. So really about leveraging your strengths, but it's going to be light up your brain. Okay, light up your brain, leverage your talents to influence, because influencing is important in our line of work, and find happiness. So I know that we will be getting that event published shortly after tonight's event. So look forward to that. Sign up right away, get it on your calendar so we can mitigate risks to calendar changes. So today, though, we are very lucky to have Allison Pollard and Emily Stickle with us. And I know that we have information in the meetup event listing about their bios, but I wanted to say that for the last couple of years, I've been really lucky to interact with Allison on probably not as regular cadence as I'd like to. Allison really leads she leads a lean coffee every Tuesday, and it's fabulous how she promotes it, how she publishes notes. It's delightful reading, if nothing else. And I have never had a bad experience when I've been able to attend. And I just wish sometimes that lunchtime didn't get overrun by client things. So the things that I appreciate about Allison as well is that she's really a vibrant learner, a practice presenter. She is all over the place. So if you're at a conference or a meetup, you'll probably hear from Allison at some point in time. And not only does she love wearing glasses, but she loves Broadway, right? Broadway shows.
I do love Broadway shows. Yes.
Yeah. So it's really cool. And Emily, again, she is from one of the improving offices. She's from Houston, whereas Ellison is from Dallas. But Emily is, I think, kind of newer to my circle of friends and influencers, but yet delightful. I mean, the classes, the presentations that I've seen, her contributions to lightning talks, et cetera, have been like really phenomenal. And the fact that she's excited to just get her family out of the house with like not even matching shoes, but just shoes on is really cool. And then today she just mentioned that recently, I think it was last weekend, she was doing Kanban for, was it elementary or was it middle school? Emily, I can't remember. Yeah.
Middle school kids, the exact age that doesn't want to learn Kanban.
I love it.
Or hang out with adults.
Yeah. You know, that's pretty brave. Middle schoolers. Like elementary is a whole different deal because elementary school kids like much more malleable and much more exciting to have fun with. Middle schoolers are kind of begrudging at times. So I'm really happy to have them here tonight to talk about change management. Change management is leadership. I don't think many of us think about change management as leadership. And that's why, you know, for my brain, I immediately go, oh, that's cool because my frame of reference is it's just putting a bunch of stuff into a tool and hoping some change review board actually approves it so it can go forward with kind of the nitty gritty of releases and productions and things like that. So with that, I just want to say thank you to both of you for volunteering to present this evening for our event. And I will turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you. It is so nice to like hear how someone else introduces you. I'm like, wow, I am amazing, aren't I? I had no idea. Yes. So Emily and I created a mural whiteboard. We wanted this to be interactive. And so I've put the link in the chat just now, so y'all can join us on the board. Play along.
It's exactly what everyone wanted to hear when they joined this call was, don't worry, guys, you'll get to do the work too.
But it's not in a breakout room, so we can't
we'll stay together. We're all good there. Yeah, I love the opportunity to come to like meetups like this. This is actually like where I grew as an Agilist. You know, nowadays I'm like enterprise Agile coach. Let me help figure out the strategy for change in your company, you know, from like the top down. And it was the exposure of going to the meetups month after month. And here in Dallas, like our local group's mission was described as, we want to help one another do better today than we did yesterday. And so it was very much like, what are the things that we're struggling with? Let's come together and have these group conversations. What have you tried? What failed? What worked? You know, how can we learn together and from one another? So that's the vibe that we invite for today as well. Even though Emily and I are down here in Texas on the other end of 35 from y'all in Minnesota, there's things that I think are going to be in common about our experiences and what you all might be facing in your companies today. All right, so looks like we got a bunch of different animals on the board, so that's good. On the right side in the outline, let's go to section 3. You'll see it's a change sponsor poll. So Cheryl was kind enough to mention my funny little emails that I send as summaries to the Lean Coffees that I host each week. I've been upping my game when it comes to memes. I have found this is the way to get people to read your email, have silly graphics in it. So I've got some silly graphics here for y'all as well. When you think about a change that you're trying to help within your company, which one of these graphics represents the sponsor of that change? Is it Mr. Scrooge McDuck? Is it Homer Simpson? Is it our minion, our Wonder Twins? Is it our doggy typing away on his keyboard? I'll give you a minute or so to grab one of those check marks, put it on the image that you think best represents your change sponsor. Oh, cool. All right. So I see we've got a couple that put Scrooge McDuck. We have one doggo. No one went with the minion. I'm a little surprised. No one went with the minion. As Emily and I were talking about this, of like, what kind of sponsor would that represent? You know, the drop the mic is, they're like, hey, I made the big announcement in the town hall. I hope you were there live to hear the amazing show, and good night, I'm out. And like, that's about it. If you were not there, you have no record of what was said. You're gonna have to hear the rumors later. Which is sometimes the sponsorship that I see. But it looks like many of you are experiencing Homer as he's like backing away into the hedge there. So tell us a bit about, what is that sponsor like for y'all?
The Homer picture for me is actually kind of similar to what you had described with the mic drop.
Yeah.
But I was imagining the sponsor like bringing me in and asking me to help their teams make all these change, and then they just back off into the weeds and disappear.
Yeah.
You may not even get that mic drop announcement. It's just go figure out who you need to work with.
Yep. I have delegated it. And good day.
I brought you here. That's my job.
Yeah. What about the Wonder Twins? What are y'all experiencing with the Wonder Twins?
This is Lori. Miller speaking. I was trying to figure out how to turn on my camera, and apparently I don't have that skill tonight.
No worries.
But I consider myself lucky right now because I happen to land in a role where the change sponsor actually wants change. And he's been a very good partner. I mean, we work together very well, and it has increased the velocity, right, of making the change happen across his direct reports, because he's totally bought in with it, and he's open to suggestions and ideas, and it's just been wonderful. This first time in many years I've worked with a leader who's like, yes, let's do it.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference when you have that engaged sponsor you get to work closely with, that they're bought in, they see what this change can do. That's awesome. I know sometimes I feel like the Scrooge McDuck over here, like, all right, I gave y'all the budget, and then I just want to check in on how are you spending the budget? How's that money side of things going? And do you need anything else approved? And that they might not be as engaged in like the rest of the work, and like they're part of that. So good stuff.
I looked at that one, the Scrooge McDuck, as, this is going to really amp up our revenues or our reputation. This is like the cool thing that we're going to do that's really going to turn our company around.
Oh, I like that idea. Yeah. Yeah, they really see the possibility of this change.
I want to know. I love that dog, but I just didn't know how to attach a thought to it.
Shiba Inu.
Yeah, I put a check mark on the dog. This is a scenario where the leaders are like, yeah, we will do it as soon as we finish the high pressure, high timeline project. And then there's another one coming after that. So you never really, even to get to do anything meaningful. So after a while, you go, okay, maybe it's probably always going to be in this firefighting mode. So
Yeah. There's just no time for the change to become a priority.
That was the
Yeah.
same impression. I was trying to get my check mark over there, but I didn't. But KJ, I was with you on that, that we're so busy, we can't take time to get a look out past that. Has been
Yeah,
more the
yeah.
experience too. Yep.
But no, I'm not the only one, so that's good.
That's the thing. Again, like Emily and I started like brainstorming here of like, all right, let's think about some of the patterns we've seen from various sponsors we've worked with in the past. And like, these are the ones that we sort of landed on of, these are very normal, behaviors or sort of like responses that we see at least at the start of a change. And so what do you do? How do you work with that? Like what is this gonna do in terms of the change success, for the organization? So let's move over to section 4 on the whiteboard here. We got a bunch of open sticky notes. So Emily, what should we brainstorm here as a group?
So this one, thinking about, we've reflected on who our sponsors are in this, thinking about some of the different projects or engagements we've been on. What are some of the activities or the things that you do as a change agent? What are some of those activities that you take part in? So we'll just kind of take a second to list out a few. I see some good clicking. Everyone's very good with mural. I didn't know if we had to do a tutorial into it, but it seems like this is the right audience to just lean right in.
Oops, I made a big giant sticky.
Hey, nifty.
I'm the one you always have to like retrain for mural.
No worries. I tend to like throw y'all into the deep end, like, let's see what happens.
Mhm.
Y'all are doing great.
I thought I could read from far away. I can't. Over.
You've got a nice little zoom button there.
Yeah, and I think I'm gonna do us all a
Yes,
favor.
that did make it nice.
Hide some cursors so it's less chaotic.
Mhm.
Looks like we still have a few people typing. All right, Allison, I think we probably are getting to the end. We'll probably wrap up and then start taking a little bit of time to sort through and discuss some of the activities that we take care of.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's look at what y'all wrote here. I see educate.
Mm-hmm.
There's at least 2 I see on educate, I think. Maybe not, maybe 1.
I
So
thought I saw 2 as well.
Yep, there are 2. One says educate/observe.
Mhm.
all right, so there's some educating that's happening. There's some communication of like the why, bringing honesty to the conversation.
Teaching is one.
Mhm.
I'm super curious about listen, like, because I think I saw that one on multiple sticky notes as well. Like, so what is listen? Who are you listening to as a change agent?
Everybody.
Everybody?
or you try to. You know, you want to hear everyone's opinion so that they become part of the change, right? So that they feel like they're empowered to share either what they like or don't like about it, and then get past that and move forward.
I really like that. I honestly was in a conversation with a new coach this morning, and he's been getting pulled into these meetings, you know, a group of leaders talking about, you know, should we change the structure of the teams and like how they do planning each quarter, da 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 da. And he's starting to like weigh in and go like, well, what's the point of that? It feels wasteful. We don't need all these people. And in working with him, we were like, what if we actually like ask the teams? Like, what if we told them, here's the problem that we think exists. Does it in fact exist for you? And if it does, how do y'all want to handle it? And he was just like, oh my God, like we can listen to the teams. Like this was like truly like earth-shattering kind of moment for him of like, I didn't know that was an option. I thought I had to continue to sit in meetings with all these leaders and we're just debating what we should be doing. And so he's all excited now of like, oh, I have a completely different conversation. I get to like help like come and like bring together. Like, how do I kick that off? How do I get the right audience in the room and tee that up? So I love the idea of like, how do we just like listen to what wants to happen, to what people's responses are around the change effort.
Yeah.
Emily, what else are you noticing here?
So one that I like is evaluate. I see that. That's an interesting one, right up there with communicate.
Yeah.
And along the lines of evaluating and understanding, there are some ask lots of questions. I think that that's something, you know, when we start looking at how that works, especially as a change agent, is, you know, understanding, when you understand the scope of the change, understanding the nuance of it. Oftentimes change agents are really just, you're given this big idea and then you have to break it down into meaningful pieces that can be owned by teams. So how do you evaluate what those pieces are? You ask lots of questions, you really push, you start to, you know, again, get the feedback from the team when you have to. But I like that. I think that's really important.
Awesome.
Identify your catalysts.
Yeah, I'm always a fan of catalysts. I'm on a catalyst team with one of my clients. So we get to, I think of it as like my little like team of coaches. We are the Mentos in the Diet Coke. You want disruption in your like team or your organization, you bring in someone from the catalyst team. You will experience a change for sure. So I love that there's these stickies here of like, let's start to identify our catalysts or activators, right? Like, let's start involving other people in making this happen. Bring the smart people to the table. So with all this, right? Like there's these like big concepts, there's these big activities. This is not like a backlog. We're like, all right, just move the things to done. Do the one-time educate, do the one-time honesty to the conversation, transparency, move on with our lives. These are ongoing. These are things that we're like continually like striving for, trying to like ensure that these things are present throughout the change effort. And we could very easily get burned out as change agents in feeling like there's so much to do. Like, what does it mean to get curious about the resistance? Well, I've got to go find those pockets of resistance in the organization. I'm going to go listen, and woof, the things I might be hearing. And you've got this like agenda, for the change, and you're feeling the responsibility of how do I help this thing to progress? And you just start feeling the weight of, the folks that are not yet on board, or they're not yet sure how to do the thing or what this means for them. And that can like really get frustrating after a while. You could start to see the resistors as as like your impediment to success as a change agent if you're not careful.
We even have a lot of the things that we mentioned on there, the communication, the meetings, the feedback. That comes when you're going through, especially when you're going through changes, that comes with the necessity for follow-up and feedback. And so you don't, those activities will constantly iterate upon themselves. And so how do you ensure that you don't have your supporters change detractors just through a lack of not being able to follow up? It's really easy to get caught in the cycle of adding on so much that it just feels impossible.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's go to section 5. This idea that we could get burned out as change agents. I think especially thinking about the last couple of years, everyone's suddenly working from home, adjusting to new tools that are being updated, like Zoom has new functionality, Teams has new functionality, all these things that we're rolling with as we go along, changes that are just kind of being pushed upon us. We don't get a whole lot of choice necessarily to embrace or opt out. It is what it is. I've been seeing a lot more change fatigue in teams and organizations that I work with, where they might have their DevOps transformation, there's the product transformation, there's the DEI transformation, there's the we're working remotely transformation, there's the so on and so on and so on. And people are just glazed over after a while. You can't even like get much response. Like I don't know if you're resisting or if you're just like completely numb at this point. You almost want to be able to like poke them. Like, can you like fall over? Do you like wobble a bit? Like what happens? I find that if we're continually to try and push, or even like, sitting back in that, like listening and like trying to get conversation generated, try to facilitate something, we might feel like I'm constantly doing this like hustle of like, how do I find the next way? What's the next thing I need to be doing? How am I, taking on as much of the hard stuff as possible, making it as easy for folks to consume as I possibly can. And if you're like me, you might have like giant stack of like sticky notes or like giant stack of like to-dos that just start to accumulate for yourself. Like, I could try this, I could try that, I could do
the
this.
whiteboard.
The whiteboard, the Kanban board that you're like, yeah, work in progress limits are awesome. I should try that myself.
Yeah. Well, and I know I talk to so many people, and like burnout's a big word now, and they talk about it a lot, but I talk to so many people who are like, I feel overwhelmed. I can't get everything done in a day. I wish there was more time. I'll just come in on the night or in the weekend and do it then. And you need to be very conscientious of that, because the work is never going to go away. It's just a different way of, it continuing to add up.
Yeah.
So think about that when you're going through.
Yeah, and I'm wondering here, we also have this note on the right side of section 5 around the dream, right? There was some purpose, or there was some vision, there was some idea that was originally in someone's mind that you've bought into to help support this change. When you start to feel like you're no longer able to explain the why, like you're just kind of focused on, again, like the tactical, how do you reconnect to what that bigger future vision is? Like, what are I'm curious, like, what are things that you all have found helpful in remembering what this change is really about, or what the intention behind it is?
I rally around people that bring that positive energy, if you will, to get that spark back, or figure out, is there something in my personal life that I can do to show that instant gratification to then be able to bring some of that energy back. But definitely surrounding myself with folks that can help add that energy and passion.
Nice.
I know for myself, it's trying to celebrate even the smallest wins. You know,
Yeah.
to just have that moment of like, okay, we did that, even if it's just something small. It's like, nope, we're just going to take time to celebrate that because there hasn't been enough of them.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, years ago, I remember large organization, lots of change going on, big team of coaches, and we had talked about maybe we should like do something to appreciate and recognize our scrum masters in particular, because they were really moving out of project management mindset into more of this team facilitator and sort of mentorship kind of role. And there was a little bit of pushback even within the coaching team of like, why should I have to thank people for doing their job? They're like, well, because we changed their job and they're starting to do it. And so if you ever get to meet me in person, maybe even like from a distance, I'm a gift giver. This is my love language. I love stuff. And so I was like, ooh, what is the like cheesiest thing I could possibly give to my scrum masters to acknowledge like, you've done it. And so I literally got these like tiny little plastic trophies that it looks like a light bulb and it can light up. And I was like, congratulations, we're having a ceremony. You're getting a signed certificate from like our VP. You have embraced the new way of working and you are helping to shine the light of transparency for your team to the organization. You've been filling out the KPIs, even though the numbers look nasty sometimes, you did it. You told the truth. And this is fantastic for the organization. And I tell you, the amount of energy, like I saw people excited about a little plastic trophy. It sat at their cubicles. The certificate was like posted near their desk. Like there was such a like moment of pride of like, someone saw me. They recognize I'm doing stuff differently. And even though we're, again, not perfect, our KPIs might not look like we're on track to deliver, but the truth is there. We're able to now have conversations we were not able to previously. And I'm moving into how to facilitate that conversation. And like, what do we do now? It's sometimes those like tiny wins and being able to like kind of like pump up the energy around it and be like, yes, we have gotten to a new problem. I love new problems.
You know, I really love that because sometimes we celebrate and, you know, it's so important to celebrate the success stories, but not from a point of arrogance, right? But from a point of, you know, discovery or, you know, and I was just mentioning the other day, like, oh, you could be the poster children because it's important to see success, even if it's minuscule, because it's on a trajectory, right?
Yeah.
And you don't have to say we're there, but we have to say, we started out here and we're like just a little bit farther and you can join us because it's fun or we're part of bringing the light or we understand it. And as part of like, you know, when we think about communication, it's not the big bang at the beginning. It's that continuous communication and how to keep it kind of bright and engaging and different all the time. And that's exhausting, but that it has to be pervasive. It has to be like, you know, don't forget a week that goes by that you can't find something to celebrate or to say we tried an experiment and this is what happened. It wasn't exactly what we wanted, but we still feel good about it because we tried X, Y, or Z. And so that is what in the past I've found like super exhausting is how do you keep it fresh? How do you keep it engaging? How do you kind of keep communicating not only like where are we going and why, but in different ways.
Yeah. Because it's super tough, you know, when we think about, you know, enterprise agile transformation, this is not like a 6-month effort. And so that idea of like, how do you keep energy year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? You can only do so much rebranding in there. And I know here in Dallas, one of my clients actually came to our user group, you know, as an attendee, you know, had the user group pizza, you know, it was back in person, And after listening to some of the questions and challenges that other folks there were bringing, she suddenly had that aha of, oh my gosh, we're past that stuff. Like I hadn't realized how far we'd come and how much progress we'd made until I start hearing other people at other companies and recognize we've been able to address that. I have things to give back to the community. I have stories to tell. And that's one of those things that I think is so important about having support systems, across your organization, even outside of your organization, to help you recognize, like, what are those shifts that we've made? What are the things that I might be taking for granted because I'm there all the time, but that could be, a moment of sharing and learning for someone else. And I need to be able to recognize I've got a story and I can be an inspiration. Even, and I will say, the number of meetups that I went to early on as an Agilist, hearing people tell me, here's what we tried and how it completely failed was the best. It was hard for me to be like, hey, I did this stuff. It was a major success. I'm like, great. So what do I take away from that? When the stars align, and if I do it exactly like you did, maybe I too will be successful, versus hey, here's what we tried. It went sideways. I'm like, oh, sideways is a possibility. Got it. I'll be on the lookout for that. How might I be able to prevent that from happening in my situation? And I think that's part of, being a change agent, bringing it back to the sponsor of there are some things that you might not realize are out there, that could happen with this change. So I want to work with you. I want to be your wonder twin partner and ensure that we're able to keep moving forward, that we keep the energy alive.
My team got our very first ever critical feedback this week in our sprint review.
Hey.
And so then we had a discussion afterwards about how great that was, and made sure that people weren't actually thinking that was really a horrible thing and that we'd failed. It was that, okay, we've learned from this, now where do we go from here and how do we make things better? So it was a great experience though.
When you're going through these changes, they're going to be uncomfortable. There's going to be things that come up. Should be expected and celebrated when you get those moments. I mean, to think that the stars are going to align all the time is a real unrealistic expectation of you as a change agent, of your team, of everything there. It's easy for us to kind of drop in and be like, we see changes all the time and we can talk to it. For some of the teams we work with though, we just uprooted their whole life, the way that they've done things for years, everything about it. And it's always important to remember that can be real uncomfortable for everybody, and that's okay. Embracing that uncomfort, addressing it, providing support, that's what's going to help push through it. Now we don't want to go around it. We need to push through it.
All right, Emily, I know I had afternoon coffee. It's kicked in. I feel like I'm hamming it up 1,000 times more than you. And I want you to just crank it up a couple notches, because change
You're
roles.
good.
This is, I tell you, you can match me.
Yeah.
I know. We're about to get into the area of your expertise of roles and change management. So you take the stage and crush us with some knowledge here.
Yeah, no worries. Sorry, I'm still getting the hang of course, we're doing it over Zoom when you co-present, and it's always that awkward, do I jump in? Do I not? So just bear with me as we go through with this. So we've gone through and we've brainstormed some things that happen as change agents, some of those activities that you complete. We've talked a little bit about what it looks like when we get to burnout. And a big part of kind of those burnout areas is us as change agents often try to do it all. And that goes back to the reason we're having this, the importance of sponsorship in change. And it really comes down to there's a whole bunch of information out there about this, but there's really 3 different roles that you look at when it comes to change management. You have your sponsor, you have your change agent, notice they're separate, and you have your audience who we're trying to connect with. And the reason why that's so important, and the reason why it's called out here is, and we're going to talk about it for the next couple of minutes, is that oftentimes as change agents, we end up burning out because we are so focused on doing the activities necessary for the sponsor and the change agent that we're trying to fill two roles. Now, in some cases, you may end up having to fill two roles. You may have to do that. But by and large, when you find your sponsor and you elevate them into the position that they should be within change management, you're able to focus on your role as a change agent. So kind of jumping right along to what our sponsors are, what they provide really. And we're actually going to talk a little bit about how to identify them. But looking at sponsors, you're really looking for somebody different than what oftentimes than the elements that we came up with when we thought about our change activities. Somebody who has the power to make decisions. A lot of struggles that I see with organizations, they're like, we're going to undergo this massive transformation, but we can't change the way we do the way that we work. We don't have approval to do that. And that's where, again, your sponsor can come in and make space for those changes. Vision is another thing that comes up. I'm going counterclockwise because we're going to end on that one. Vision is another one. We mentioned earlier, where do you have that unifying call? Where's that battle cry that comes from the top, the line that keeps everyone going? We're going to have to decompose this into what those change activities are, but you have to have a solid and consistent vision as it moves along. And then somebody who can leverage their role. We talk about sponsors. We did the meme activity, and maybe that person at the top, the CEO, who likes to make an announcement on the microphone and then leave. But more often than not, your sponsor is somebody who's working closely with you, your team, and can really leverage their role to get you the things that you need to do your job and unblock the team. And then finally, this is noted because it comes from PMI as a sense of urgency. And Allison and I were talking about this a little earlier. I think we've moved past that. We all just went through going remote for the pandemic. We've had senses of urgencies for years. Really and truly what we came up with was having that discussion around that's more of a level of consistency. And that's even come up a couple of times as we work through this. Making sure that your sponsor doesn't just show up. They're not just there waving from afar, but they're actively engaged. How are things going? How are people feeling? How can I continually support or message or provide the feedback that you need to really push through to the next stage? Because remember, this is going to be uncomfortable for a lot of people. So they're going to need somebody to tell them how to do it. And then oftentimes a consistent sponsor who can tell them why and what they can give them to get there. So anything I should add to that? Any questions?
What do y'all make of it?
Yeah, I'm not quite the engaging woman that Allison is. I'm still letting my afternoon coffee kick in. Yeah, I've spent, it mentioned I came from the corporate side. And so I had done project management for years, Agile coaching, and as abnormal to a lot of coaches, it really started at the enterprise level because I worked with executives and top-down management and changes. And so this is really important. And I actually spent a lot of time coaching my leaders, my directors and VPs on what it looks like through change management. And one of the things I talked a lot about was you're going to coach up and down. You're going to have to coach down to your team on kind of what you want to see, and you're going to have to coach up to your sponsors to tell them what you need. Because you can't, again, we reviewed burnout. When you as an individual try to play both roles, you're going to end up tripling your work. You're going to end up with people who are confused and frustrated, and you're going to be in a position where you're trying to answer questions that in the Agile space reasonably wouldn't be able to add.
This is one of those spaces where it's so important to have that sponsor get educated so that they don't keep taking you backwards to, asking for the old project management kind of things. And, making sure that they're playing their new role in this and not their old role.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think
sorry.
Go for it.
No, I was just wondering if you've found with your experience that there are similarities in terms of like how and what you have to coach. Like, do you see the same things over and over again from sponsors just kind of like not getting it, needing that education, or not so much?
I think that's probably a good segue into the next of our group, because I have seen consistencies in a lot of my coaching. However, a lot of it depends on what role they fill within the organization. It's going to be a combination of kind of what sponsor you see, but a lot of what I've had to do is coaching around individual roles. So why don't we hop over to the next one, if that's okay?
Yeah, section 8.
To who is your sponsor? And so before we go too far, just take a moment, knowing now what a sponsor is and the type of responsibilities they would have. Here, I'm stuttering already. Take a second to write down who you think a sponsor would be. Who would they be in the framework of your engagement or an organization or anything like there? We'll just take a quick second. And we're on number 8 with the fun little sticky notes.
So you want the role of a sponsor?
Yeah, like maybe their job
The
title,
role
like
that
what
you
their
would-
position is.
Yeah, in the organization.
Okay.
And this isn't a quiz. There's going to be multiple right answers, so it's okay.
Really, there's no wrong answer.
Yeah, there's no wrong answer.
Yeah, I know. I always kind of have to go back. Like, I'm just going to take it back a couple of engagements so that it's a little obfuscated, so to speak. You know.
Well, and that's the, we'll go take a deeper dive, but one of the important things is finding your sponsor. And so often I've seen a lot of coaches, especially when I was on the FTE side, walk in and immediately single out CEO, CFO, COOs, who the sponsors were, when they reasonably didn't have the ability or the interest in facilitating any of these changes. And they missed out on finding the very meaningful sponsors who could actually help them enact change because they defaulted. You might find that it's, if you work on a large team, maybe it's the team manager. Maybe that's who it is. So there's all levels and there's no right or wrong answer, but it's definitely a moment to pause and reflect on who can provide those elements that we've reviewed before, who can provide consistency and vision and support and reasonably make space for teams to have that psychological security and the safety to push through a difficult situation like change management is. So it looks like we've got a couple. I see people writing up. We'll wrap this up here in just a minute. I like it. All right. And I think we probably hit on just about all the items that came from ProSci. We hit on the senior manager. I see a leader of PMO, we've got department leads, team managers, and direct managers. And so again, you just look at it on every level. Now you often have, not often, there are two, as you get more well-versed in sponsorship and change management, you'll find that there's going to be sponsors who are going to provide more tangible support. They're going to be the ones clearing calendars, ensuring that technology is paid for and available as part of it. They're going to be the ones that really can enact the physical needs that the organization has to push through. And you'll find that there's sponsors that may be the CEOs, the mic drop, who have to set the vision for the organization to work. And they are their own type of sponsors. But again, when you get into these engagements, especially when you find yourself burned out and you don't know why you're getting so much resistance from people and you don't know why you can't complete tasks, start looking around to who should be your partner, who should be your sponsor and partner in this, and how can we identify them? And it may not be who the person is just present it.
Yeah, this has been one of my ahas in like talking with Emily and like really drawing from her like brain on the subject of change management. It helped me to crystallize that while one of my clients has buy-in at the CIO level of we need to have dedicated time for all of the teams to be learning new skills and making improvements, in like the code base, they can announce that at, say, that town hall setting, and there's another level of sponsorship needed to make it real. The CIO is not going to get pulled in when that team is getting pressure from their product owner or their stakeholders around delivery of, their business enhancements. We're going to need the team's managers or maybe director coming in, because they're closer to that context, closer to that change, to then be more of like the sustaining sponsor of how do I now help make the CIO's vision real? How do I provide the air cover to this particular team to get the dedicated time that we're supposed to have and to make the trade-offs, in terms of what the business enhancements are going to be versus some of these other improvement items that we want to be able to address. And so knowing that it's not even that there's just a single sponsor person that you're looking for, it might be multifaceted. Another client of mine, we have sponsorship from IT. Awesome. And some of the changes that are going to be happening in the IT organization are going to impact their PMO. Their PMO reports up through a different leadership chain. So we're going to need to have our IT sponsor basically make friends with someone that leads the PMO so that we start to get PMO sponsorship for some of the changes that their group might need to make over time to help support the things that are happening in IT. And so like having this kind of lens, having some of this language, I have found really helpful in helping my clients to look at who are the players, who needs to be activated, from a change agent. Where can we find some of those like catalysts? Where can we find some of those partners that'll help us with the messaging and the consistency of the messaging as we go along?
You also may have to look up one of the things I've seen, especially in operations, a lot of failures. So like our sponsor is here, said, but their boss is the one who has to clear all these changes with HR. So you're going to hit blockers. Like you can't dramatically change roles without that. So it sounds like we've got another layer of sponsorship that we need to get engaged because they'll start clearing our paths. Yeah. But the important thing is the answer is never, well, I'm going to go make friends now. That's your sponsor's role.
Well, and sometimes I think about, as coaches, we almost like believe sometimes like, if I can just be like extra charismatic, like how can I become every leader's like BFF that they trust me personally? And then like every team member trusts me personally. They're all like going along with, and I'm like, I only know a couple of coaches that have that superpower of being able to like connect with people and like get them to go along with things. And even then, that coach leaves, they move on to like a different area and the change starts to like slip back. That there wasn't enough quite like buy-in and support from the local leaders, from different parts of that context for it to really sustain over time. And that's the other thing I think about is how we grow the sponsors and really equip them in these different parts of the organization are part of that sustainability, that they're now going to be growing and learning alongside the teams or alongside some of these other roles that are changing.
Looking ahead, we touched a little bit on how to find your sponsor. And I think we've already kind of talked a little bit about those things that happen without a sponsor. Whenever I'd like to think I'm the most likable person in the world, but I'm always going to need to have somebody, especially on an organizational level, help when we look at that, look at really enacting long term.
All right, Emily, I'm trying to read your mind there because I think we just sort of like touched on a couple different areas on the mural.
We did. We probably could have. I built the slides. We just finished up discussing how to find your sponsor, and like we mentioned. So if you hop over to 15, finding it, when you know the roles and you know what your engagement is trying to accomplish, that's when you can start to troubleshoot. And it's not as easy as doing equations, but you can start to say, is the person who is presented my sponsor, are they able to reasonably provide the support I need for this to be long-acting, meaningful change that teams are going to be able to embrace and move through? And so, that's how you start to find your sponsor, is asking those questions and finding out who will reasonably be able to provide that support. So then when we hop over to slide 16, although we did touch on this a little bit, what does it look like when you don't have that sponsor? And that's where you start to get burnout, circling back to the front. When you don't have the sponsor, that's when you start to see, I've got to do both. I'm trying to set the vision and help you plan the processes. And that starts, to manage both is uncomfortable and confusing to teams. You also likely, as a change agent, and appropriately, won't be able to answer some of the difficult and messy questions. If somebody's job title is changing dramatically through this, there are likely going to be questions or concerns about compensation that come up, or job titling, and that's not an appropriate role for a change agent. When you decide to try to fill all of those roles, or start stepping into the whole, I'll have to go get all the answers for that, that's when you go underwater. And when you start to go underwater for the nuance that could be owned by your sponsors, when you stop being able to provide the meaningful support of getting your team through that uncomfortable process of change.
Yeah, it's also one of those areas where, again, if you don't have the right sponsorship in place, am I going to listen to the coach as the change agent? Am I going to listen to my boss? Am I going to listen to my VP? Am I going to listen to whoever it is that is probably going to be weighing in on my performance review or my career direction more so than the coach? And again, that's why I sometimes feel like as coaches, we start to go down this like silly thinking of but if I'm just more charismatic, right? If I make a jazzier workshop, or if I explain it the right way, they'll believe me, when no, you're not going to be able to combat that. What you need to be doing is focusing again on some of those leaders and where are they coming from? What is it that they're seeing and hearing? And what does this change mean for them and their role in the organization? I remember years ago, I was getting ready for this kickoff of what we called an improvement kata with a group. And we're all right, we're going to have this kickoff. We're going to have the VP come in. He's going to do the welcome speech and kind of set the stage of why are we all here? What is it that we're going to be trying to do differently around, this application that is going to really help the organization in the longer term. And so we meet with him and he's I don't want to sound like an idiot. So y'all give me some talking points. We're yeah. Give him these bullet points. We're all right. So we show up, everyone's there. We're okay, Stephen, take it away. And he gave the most glorious speech. And I'm yes. We have the best sponsor at the executive level. This guy is so smart. He's brilliant. Take my money right now. I want this thing to happen. And then his direct report started talking, and we hadn't done as much prep with the direct report. And so when he starts talking, it's yeah, what my boss said, and blah, 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 exactly the direction that we've been going about doing this for the last year.
Yep.
And it completely undid the momentum that we had built up in the first 10 minutes. And it was obvious then of oh, there's this power challenge, communication challenge stuff going on. I was we're not going to be able to overcome that right here in front of everyone. That it was sort of that lesson back of, again, there's multiple layers of sponsorship. We need to work with all of them, not just the highest one in the organization. You've got to be able to help your sponsors look smart sound intelligent, be trustworthy in front of their people. And some of that might be some tough conversations. Some of it might be really easy conversations in the background of just, hey, like I want us to be on the same page around this. Like, let's practice. Because I also know from other leaders that I've worked with, they would, be really clear on what they wanted to say. They say it. And then me being closer to the teams, I can come up to them later and go, I think you just got misinterpreted, because here's the message that the teams just took away from what you said. And it's not quite what you meant. So like, good try, like lesson learned. There's something of like, all right, how could we check for that? How do we get more two-way communication going openly between leader and the teams directly? But at least with me on that, like listener as change agent, there's a earlier recognition that something's not quite where we want it to be. And like, now what's the game plan, of how do we get that alignment that we were looking for?
I was at a company a few years ago where the CEO, or actually CIO, regularly had meetings with everyone in IT and talked about, all of this new great stuff and where we were headed. And, people would ask him questions, and it was, just sort of this informal chat, and he'd do it like weekly. And, somebody'd ask a question and I knew that this person was on the call. And then later the same day, that person would say something exactly opposite, going back to the old way. And it was like, okay, I know that you were on that call where you listened to the CIO talking about these changes. Why would you even say that? And it was really clear that, that sort of middle layer of management was pushing back the other direction.
Yeah. Well, and Emily, I'm trying to remember what you've said in the past around like the messaging, like what helps to make that message like sticky or like effective. You have no idea what I'm talking about.
There's a lot of stuff on communication, but for me, one of the things that I really pushed when I coached new coaches to things like this is when you try to play the role of sponsor and change agent, you lose your ability to start adding that clarification, your ability to go back and add those clarifying points with the sponsors, or the ability to identify that situation where two sponsors aren't agreeing. If you're trying to set the message and the clarification, you get lost in that middle. You become more noise in the communication cycle. So separating yourself from that allows you the opportunity to be that clarifying element, to say, I understand that there's two. I'm going to work with you to get the correct message and to help facilitate those conversations. We're going to find those. And so again, it goes back to the importance. Sponsorship might be a little bit hectic on there. You can figure it out. But as long as you're not trying to be the sponsor as well, that's when your role as a change agent can shine, where you can be that consistent voice, even if it is, I got to go back and figure out what's going on now. So I also I think one of the things you're referencing is I hate the flyby decisions. I see a lot of sponsors do this. I'm going to announce in a meeting, this is the new way of work. And then there's no follow-up. People it wasn't in the context they understood. And so there's so many people out there. They're like, well, they keep trying to go back to the old way we're doing things. Well, the new way we were doing things was never memorialized. We didn't close the communication gaps. I always push for people, I pushed for all of my teams, and they did. It was 3 forms of communication, at least 1 in writing across 2 channels. And so ensuring the push and pull communication. How can I tell somebody in writing what the change is and then provide them back the information that they need to make it? And so that again goes back to my understanding of role as a change agent is sponsors are going to give you that vision, but they're often not going to button up where that is. That's where we can help solidify those.
Yep, that's what it was.
But I can't do that while Yep.
Yeah, well, and because I had one leader that he would actually, send out more like the written memos, like, oh, I've been advocating for the change. It's clearly, coming through our newsletter with my name attached. So if people read the newsletter that is being emailed out, they know about it. And I'm like, yes. And especially again, that two-way communication, like we need the Q&A forum, or we need the town hall where you're announcing it and like they're picking up on the excitement and like the energy around it, that it's hard to you know, rely on like one way of sharing that message and then actually getting people on board with it. And yeah, especially the other side of it of like, I said it live and then you all went to other meetings and you like barely remembered what we just talked about or what I just shared with you. It's so tough.
My favorite one, when I was giving at a conference, I was giving a presentation on communication. I said, raise your hand if you've ever stopped to ask your team what their preferred method of communication is. And like 3 hands went up. Nobody ever thought to do that. And it's like, how can my sponsor generally is going to announce it wherever they're going to announce it. My job is to make sure that the team is ready to accept that information. I've worked with teams who email is all the way. They're never going to receive it if it's on an email. It's not considered official in their mind if it's in a chat. I've had other teams where I have 15 minutes. That's it, 15 minutes verbally. And I will have to say it 3 or 4 times, but I have to understand. And it's a lot of that, again, going back to being a change agent, understanding how can I get the information to my team in a meaningful way, because my sponsor is going to give it to me. We can coach them into some of it, but understanding that you meet people where they're at and you can close the communication gaps that come with change management.
Yeah. And I think that like question a little while ago of like, are there certain things we tend to be coaching sponsors on? You know, for me, working with largely IT leaders, it's sometimes like recognizing the human element, you know, of great. So you're going to be sharing, you know, the message of like what this change is about. You can give the like very accurate, logical explanation of like, we need to be moving to the cloud so that we can set up our business to be able to deploy more frequently and blah, 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 you know, or we need to be adding automated tests so that the quality stays consistently high, Like it falls flat very, very quickly. Or tell us like the like future, you know, like really envision like what emotionally is it going to be like, of like, imagine a world where we are able to deploy code 1 hour after you've checked in. Wow, wouldn't that be incredible? We could get things in the hands of the customers and they would be delighted. Think about how much friction we've removed from the developer experience if you are able to have your product owner approve your user story and it's in the production environment within 1 hour. We've probably removed the tickets. We've probably removed all the approval gates and all the da. If you start to get more into the like telling like the what's in it for me at the team member level, at the manager level, that it's like an emotional journey. This is almost like me also kind of selling like, hey, you know what you're going to want to check out? Chris Wickett's upcoming talk on Strengths Finders. How do you recognize the strengths of your individual sponsors? How do you let them shine? How do you build them up so that they get to be the inspiration? And then where do they need supporting, you know, cast from others in the organization? So there's my plug, Chris Wickett. Check
Well,
it out.
yeah, thank you. And that's a great connection, because if it is not their strength, they even have to really rally around a team that does have that strength.
Yeah.
Yes,
I really love working with technology leaders that like they're so smart on the tech, and then like people kind of unaware. And I'm like, yeah, let me tell you about people and humans and like how they have emotions.
Yeah.
They respond to things. There's energy.
Thank you. Thanks for the plug too. Yeah.
Well, and I've worked with HR leaders too, where I'm like, oh, you shouldn't be in front of people. There's a certain group of HR people who tend to represent us, and we ignore the rest. Yeah. I worked with one sponsor though at an executive level, and he had retired at a much different level, came back, was still sponsored many of the things. He'd never had to do any sort of morale boosting. He'd always been the big announcement and then leave.
Mm.
And so I spent a lot of time coaching him in his new position in the company and his role as a sponsor into how do you check in with the team? Sometimes, as a sponsor, you need to hear and understand the needs of people. Maybe you'll hear them from myself as a change agent asking for assistance, but you need to provide the voice of consistency. He had always been the director type, I will tell you what to do and you will do it from me. And so the day he called me and asked, he goes, so with this thing, should I just show up and buy ice cream one day? Yeah, actually, it's great. Just ask people how they're doing. And so he never had to play that role, but we coach, and we did a lot of coaching before he had ice cream. He's that type of personality. But it was one of those really kind of taking the time, again, finding those strengths and coaching him into it, going back to what we would expect to see in the sponsorship roles. He was great with the vision, but he was not great when it came to consistency. And he wasn't great in creating elements of psychological security around a department. And he really made a conscious effort to start to find ways to plug in there.
I love it. So always do ice cream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He also brought his spirit, which was great.
Nice. But I think that's, again, like the reason why, like when Emily and I, looked at the advice from PMI and, build a sense of urgency, and we hear that in so many change models, and it's like, I don't necessarily want to like light a fire under people at the start. And then again, month 1, month 2, month 3, year 1, year 2, year 3, right? Had to like keep urgency up, and it feels artificial and inflated, and it's just taxing on people. And again, it's more about the consistency. And I do find that will be more difficult for the executive sponsors, that they have such a like bigger picture, like strategic view of the organization. They're used to like, okay, I've said the thing, it starts to like go into action. I don't worry about it anymore. Or I think it's already happening, and not recognizing how long does it take for the organization to like really execute or like absorb that change.
Mm-hmm.
That it wasn't just done, the instant you announced it and said it was a priority. There were other things happening. There's, all this, shifting of priorities or upscaling or like getting connected to the right resources and training and learning in order for the change to start to like roll out more effectively. That is the reason we would want our executives to stay connected with that two-way communication, to recognize you got to keep drumming that message over and over. Like, we're not there yet. And that if you're using it verbally, if you're putting it in written communication, you will be amazed that there will come a day where you think, God, I'm so tired of this message. Like, it is so boring. I keep like reiterating this. And then there will still be someone that one day is like, wow, it'd be like a great idea. This thing that the sponsor like just announced, as if they've never shared it before, it will suddenly like click in. And that's the stuff that we're listening for, of like, aha, we've got the alignment, and like, how do we help them? How do we help that audience like move forward? How do we help them apply? How do we help reinforce this? Cool. So let's see. So what happens, I think we've already touched on this quite a bit, right? The time challenges, the planning challenges. If you don't have your sponsor, the vision certainly is going to be difficult. Moving over, and
we were
Emily,
so interested in. We just hammered through this. We had some great discussion. We've kind of gone over some of the elements of change agents, which is number 19, talking about the skill set. And again, I'm not going to say you're never going to be change agent and sponsor. You're going to use your experience and your judgment, but it goes back to, do you want to manage the vision or the process to get there? And it's difficult to do both. It's confusing to do both. It doesn't serve teams to do both. And so start to formalize your role as a change agent, where you can support, again, coaching up and down, because It's not my job to take on all the work. It's my job to find a strong sponsor who's the appropriate position in a company and coach them into their role as part of the change elements. And then it's my job to continue to support them as a peer and a partner and ensuring that their vision is really comes to fruition in this.
Yeah. And I think, this slide here on number 19 about the change agent, I love that you named it like the skills that pay the bills. This is not stuff that gets covered in your Scrum Master class, typically. This is not the land of Agile, and it's not necessarily part of like that obvious career path that you might be growing in initially, where you're thinking, I need to learn the different frameworks. I might need to learn how to facilitate certain things. This really is like a related tangent to the work that we do. Emily grew up in it, coming from that operations HR background. I kind of went, I think I hear some people kind of sort of talking about this. Let me read. Let me go to that conference session. Let me go to that conference. There's a whole like change management class I can take. There's so much out there, but you're not going to find it only when you search for Agile, and you're certainly not going to find it only if you're searching for Scrum. That's part of the reason we wanted to do this session. It can be hard to discover what already exists and what's already available, like rely on the wisdom that's out there in the world, that we wanted to help bring it in front of you and give you at least the Cliff Notes version of what can help you tomorrow that maybe makes it better than today.
Yeah. One of the jobs, and Allison's heard me on several of the lunch and learns that we do, one of the jobs that I pull from the most in my coaching role was my time spent as a case manager for older adults. I carried a caseload of about 80 adults or about 10 adults over the age of 80 with no immediate family. And a lot of the skills that I had in coaching, helping people, it's not my job to tell you your goals. You know your goals. It's my job to get you there. How do I ask those questions? How can I be meaningful? How can I speak sometimes using a vernacular or a way of talking that may be difficult for us to connect on? How can I start to, again, meet them where they're at? And so it's very easy, again, to kind of say, I want to do change management. I'll Google Scrum and Agile and maybe project management or whatever it is. But a lot of times you have those inherent skills. I spent a lot of time negotiating with 2 small children. They're more difficult to negotiate than some of the executives I've worked with. And so you start to find those places where you say, it's not, my role is a change agent. The skills that I bring isn't that I'm a certified Scrum Master. It's that I understand sometimes I'm going to have to disappoint people, and that disappointment is going to be okay. That doesn't mean I'm bad at my job. My job is to keep everyone happy. My job is to accomplish the goals. And my experience will help me learn where to disappoint people and how to soften the blow. And again, I can't learn that from a PMI class. I learned that from having 2 little kids. So there you go. We can, as we wrap up, you can know that I've disappointed my children.
There you go.
I like
there you
that.
go.
I need to know where to disappoint.
I'm sure you're the first parent to do that too.
Yeah,
I do.
Kind of balance. I know I'm going to disappoint somebody. How's it going to look today? Which is the easiest one for me to manage, or which one can we work through?
I love the negotiating with the kids. You're right.
Yeah. But I think that's again, like kind of that like humbling moment of when you're trying to do it all as the change agent of like, I can make the change happen through my abilities alone. And you don't have the sponsor that's engaged, and you don't have the sponsorship at the right levels, and that they're not, putting on their hat and playing their part. You're going to feel like you're failing when really you're trying to become a superhero, and it's just unrealistic. That you need to be able to like reflect and say, okay, I need to take a step back. I'm trying to do too much on my own. And what are the other roles? Like, what are the other functions that are meant to exist for this change to happen? And it still might not go, swimmingly and like smoothly and perfectly, but we can at least have the change so that it does move together. and being able to like activate the different parties and help them find the alignment so that they are moving along in the change process. We do have a couple of resources here at the bottom on section 20. You know, we reference some things out of PMI. ProSci is a change management model methodology. It is very robust. It's very popular. So we've got their sponsor checklist here. And then this other one that I like just remembered this morning that I thought was pretty cool. The Art of the TikTok Doc from Lara Hogan. It's a very simple template that you can download and start to fill in to recognize like what is the vision, you know, like how do I describe the what, the why, the who, the how, the when, and like what are the different audiences. You know, so as I think about one of my clients, again, like IT might be the initial sponsor. So, all right, we probably need the CIO trying to get the VPs and the directors on board. So that might be our first audience. There might be then this like later audience, like all the team members and like their managers. We then are going to have an audience more than likely with like some of the other like leadership, say like the PMO or the product management group, or we might need to bring in HR. Like who are the other areas that are going to be impacted that do not report directly within IT? We need to like build up the leadership buy-in and then like however the rest of their organization. So there's like a whole lot of different communication, you know, conversations that need to happen. And, you know, we can kind of like go with the flow and make it up as we go along and like iterate ad hoc. And it's like really chaotic and people might hear things when they're not supposed to, or the message gets misinterpreted, you know, all this like stuff that can go sideways. Or we can create a little TikTok doc and be mindful of it and you know, ensure, hey, we made sure we included the right people and that we really gave some consideration to what they need to hear and start that conversation with them.
I think it's so easy for us to get caught up in the whole, I was brought in for this vertical, I'm going to serve this vertical, and I assume that everyone else has been notified, when the transformations that I've seen, the most successful ones, have taken a pause before they got started and said, who are my enabler departments? Who are the other areas in this organization who are either going to be impacted or will assist me in making long-term meaningful change, and get them involved early on? And then the ones that I've really, the different transformations I really enjoyed working with are those who have a communications professional there with you, because myself included, oftentimes we start doing the work and we have no way of sharing the work that's being done. And one of the biggest ways to disappoint and disengage your audience at any level is forcing them to change without providing regular information when they have that void. And so my favorite ones of when we've got a communication professional that says, okay, we've got the month planned out. This is when I want to get this information. These are the channels we're going to hit. Let's go ahead and make sure we have the audiences. Are we missing anybody? Love working with those. You don't have to always have a professional. There's a lot of resources out there to do it, but just planning ahead of time how to make sure that you don't leave anyone out, because the person left out of the communication is probably going to be the first person to say, well, we don't need that.
Yeah.
Great.
Questions, reactions?
Very helpful and timely. Thank you guys very, very much. Yeah.
Quiet group. Is it just because it's the evening?
The coffee wore off. No.
Yeah, I think this was very helpful.
Yeah.
You could hear my text. It wouldn't be quiet.
Yeah. Yeah, it was very serendipitous. So thank you. Yes.
And I'm just
I know especially like some of y'all wear multiple hats, like Chris and Mark. I know at Improving, like there are certain things y'all are the sponsors, and then there are certain things you're the change agents. So I imagine you might have like picked up on some ideas, like thinking like both contexts.
Yeah, for sure.
And communication, to your point, is yeah,
Mhm.
huge, huge, huge. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think
I'm a
back
nerd about
over, like years and years of different experiences and how the world has changed, that there's, clarity around things like change management, even though being called a change agent 20 some years ago, it's not the same world. So things have changed. And there were very many different kinds of, it was like agile transformation or anything, but it was even before that, it was just like organizational things where it was so obvious to those of us that were like almost on the ground floor to see, vice presidents fighting with each other, like openly fighting. So it's like, this does no good. Why are you still here? And why haven't you been coached? But it was before the days of mentoring and coaching, I think, for executives. They could be ruthless and so-called charming to someone. I don't know who.
Yeah,
but,
they know how to manage up, or honestly, there's still those cases like they get enough results that someone's like, I can't challenge them because they results. And you're like, that's a shift too, I think, that's happening nowadays of we are becoming less tolerant of some behaviors regardless of the results, the amount of sales that you're producing or the number of customers that you've brought in or whatever the thing might be.
And the importance of everyone in the organization to actually fulfill attainment of a goal. I mean, you can say all you want if you're, some snarky vice president who's always had results, but if you lose 20,000 people that are employees that actually do the work, you're not successful. The organization's not successful. And I've seen that way too many times in some large companies in the past. So I'm like super, super glad that thought process, the way that we work today has changed.
Yeah. Well, even, I generally would not go up to my executives that I'm working with and go, hi, I want to coach you. Because I learned this in one organization in particular, that the leaders that had coaches were given coaches because they had perceived performance issues. And so it had this connotation that coaching is for people that are not doing well in their job. Yeah. And so you really didn't want to be like, hi, I'm here to coach you. Because they're like, I'm awesome. I'm rocking it. I'm doing well. I don't need to be fixed. You can go away. Now, instead, it's more of a like, hey, I want to support you. I want to partner with you. I want to make sure I'm aligned with you. And then you're just kind of bringing in some coaching, some mentoring, like alongside that. You're starting to weave in. Yeah, it's pretty normal for leaders to not know XYZ, or they often miss this kind of stuff. Or here's some things that I'm also of the, I don't ask people like, hey, can I give you some feedback? The neuroscience says like to ask that question, it's as if someone just like crossed paths with a bear, like terrified. Oh my God. So instead I'll usually frame it as like, may I share some observations or can I share some thoughts with you? And it softens it. We're like, yeah, sure. That sounds harmless enough. I'm like, yeah, that's what you think. Let's go. I'm like, hey, so I got the sense people took away this thing from what you said when I think you meant for this other message to be the one that they heard. Like, oh, good to know.
Yeah. That's great.
Taking the approach of addressing elements first. I spent a lot of time there. It's not you I need to address. Hey, I see that we've got some questions around these goals. I want to sit and visit with you. And then the whole, well, I see this directive. Okay, have you thought about how this may impact that? I don't need to get you. We're gonna brainstorm around something that's not you so we can reflect.
Yep.
That's not going to work for all things, but it's a good entry point into kind of building trust in a relationship and an understanding that feedback is just something where it's an opportunity for you to reflect, for you to think about things in a different light.
So sell it, they'll buy it.
Yeah, sell it so they'll buy it.
That's Chris's line. I gotta give credit. You do.
Yeah.
And we're the CEOs, you're perfect. However, I'm worried about these things. Oh, well, if I'm perfect, how can I fix it? I'd really like to see the way you handle. Maybe could you say it this way? I mean, you're perfect, but if you could say it this way. So
It would be understood by the rest of us non-perfect
I
types.
love it. Emily, that's funny. That is good.
I love it.
That's good.
Well,
Everyone, this is really great. I really appreciate it.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
guys very much. Very much.
Welcome.
Yep, and everybody
thank
come
you.
back next month and see Chris talking about strengths
We'll
finders.
tie in
Chris-
this
Right.
whole thing.
Chris and-
So
your
over the
strength.
next month, you're gonna go
Angela.
identify your sponsors.
Yeah.
You're gonna like start that conversation, start that relationship with them,
Yeah.
and then you're gonna come back next month, and Chris is gonna enlighten you on your strengths, their
Strengths.
strengths, how you can like make some magic happen.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know what
Piggyback
happens the
off
month
of
after
good.
that, but you'll just keep building on it.
Yes.
Okay, thanks
Awesome.
everyone. Have a great
Thank
night.
you.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.